Good day, everyone. This is Daniel Broniatowski from the Maestro Musicians Academy. I'm the director of a music school that is based in Greater Boston, and we serve not just Boston, but the world via the World Wide Web. We have locations in Lexington, Bedford, and Walpole, Massachusetts. And as far as our online presence goes, we offer lessons online to anyone, anywhere. And you can find out about us at maestromusicianslexington.com, maestromusiciansbedford.com, or walpoleschoolofmusic.com. Today, we're going to talk about a question which is often asked, and as you will see later, not terribly relevant, but it's still important that we address the question. The question is, how much practice time is optimal for my child? You can also apply this to yourself if you are an adult or teenage student. So the question about how much practice time is optimal, I will tell you, is very easy to answer in one sentence. And the answer is as much as you would need to accomplish your goals. So what does that mean? Well, we have this kind of set mindset, or many people do have this set mindset, that music lessons are a little bit like sports, in the sense that if you just do X numbers of repetitions of playing a certain piece of music, you're going to learn it, and then you can move on to the next level. That's kind of true, but not 100%. And here's why. Technique is everything when it comes to music. I mean, our end goal is to make music. It's to be able to perform with conviction and confidence and be able to present something that everyone wants to listen to. But at the end of the day, if we're doing the same thing a million times for half an hour or 1 hour, 2 hours, whatever, and it's not producing the right results, we're not going to get anywhere. So the beauty of what music lessons teach is the thinking outside of the box approach. So what does this mean? It means that if something is not going right in your practicing and you're not getting a certain result that's working, that's where the teacher comes in, or that's where you as a student or parent have to think, okay, how can we try something different? Now, obviously, kids who are 6 years old and starting, they don't have those skills, but we develop those skills over time. But getting back to our topic, how much practice time is optimal? Well, I can answer that with a certain number. And that number will fluctuate based on how much material your teacher has given your child or how old your child is. But let's take some starting points and go from there. Then we're going to talk about real world examples. So let's say Chris is 6 years old and he's just starting to play piano for the first time. Well, at the beginning, our goal is not to give children a routine, but we would like them to get so excited about what they did at the lesson that they go home and they try maybe a bunch of times what they learned in the lesson, and they kind of marvel at how cool it is that they can play whatever it is that they learned. So we're not really going to be stressing any kind of routine at the beginning. We're more interested in just the fact that they have these new skills that they can try, and we want them to keep coming back to the piano, because if they're not enthusiastic about it or interested, then either we're not doing our job properly or the instrument is not right for them. We, of course, address those situations in many different ways, and that's a situation and a topic for another time. But let's talk about routines now. So let's say a child has been in our program for 6 months, a year, depends on the situation, but let's say 6 months. That's when we can start thinking, if they're ready, if they're old enough, to give them assignments where we say, okay, we'd like you to try this for next week, and how would you feel about playing this song in our recital coming up? So we have a goal to work toward. That's one way to inspire and motivate kids. Now, in order to get from point A to point B, whether it's performing for a recital, just learning a piece for the next week's lesson, or maybe just wanting to improve and get to another level, that's when we start talking to a child about the fact that if they do a certain number of repetitions of a certain technique or a certain piece that they've learned, they're going to do it better the following time. And actually, the lesson is a perfect time to develop that skill. So what happens in the lesson is that a teacher will help a student, guiding him or her through good practice technique. But it's not just practice technique, it's playing technique that's important. Because if I went to a student and said, all right, take 3 and call me in the morning, in other words, play 3 versions or 3 iterations of this song, and then let's see how it goes next week, it might not go so well because they don't necessarily have the tools to be able to play what I'm asking them, especially if we're trying to advance from one technical level to another. So what does that mean? Well, you know how a lot of students and kids, they learn scales and they learn different kinds of exercises. Well, all of those are designed in such a way so that when they're playing their pieces, those techniques that they've learned in the exercises are actually there to make the pieces easier. And the student will eventually say, oh, I remember this. This is like the scale that we learned, 3 weeks ago. And now I can play it in the piece and it's going to get easier. So how does this relate going full circle? At the beginning, I was talking about how you can't just practice with bad technique. You can't just play for the sake of playing and look at the clock and say, all right, well, my minutes are up now. You have to think, what is it that you're trying to accomplish based on the technical stuff that you've worked on in the lesson? So I know it sounds very abstract, but let's talk about real world examples right now. So many of you will know what a scale is. A scale is just a collection of notes that goes from one note of one name to another note of the same name. And there are often, in the traditional scales, 8 notes between the first and the second. So for instance, da 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 dum, and then back down, da 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 dum, etc. So I won't torture you with my singing. But what happens with the scales is that you're developing finger position, you're developing hand position, you're developing strength, dexterity, and all of those things that you're developing are very important. So that way, when you encounter maybe the same scale or parts of a scale in a piece of music, you're gonna be able to recognize it and say, "Oh, this makes sense." So often, what a teacher will do is say to a student, "I'd like you to practice 5 iterations of the C major scale, or a part of the scale, or some exercise. It doesn't matter what it is specifically." So that's part and parcel of how we practice. So a good teacher and a good school will recognize that in a lesson there has to be a structure. There might be some kind of notebook where the teacher is listing what assignments are expected and might say, please practice this a certain number of times. So for an 8-year-old, for instance, it might take them half an hour to get through all the assignments, maybe 20 minutes in a given day. And that's when we start talking about repetition. Let's see if I can get some light in here so I'm not so transparent. Nope, that made it worse. We'll have to fix that next time. Anyway, so what happens is that the more complex and the more material that a student is able to handle, the longer the practice time can be. It's not that we're practicing for the sake of looking at the clock. We're practicing so that we develop muscle memory. And the more you do something correctly, the better habits you develop. You have good habits and bad habits. You have good habits. The more you practice something the wrong way, the harder it is to dig yourself out of the hole and climb out to be able to sort the bad habit problem. So that's how we deal with practicing. What happens when a kid is even older? 10 years old, 12 years old, they can start handling 45-minute practice sessions, which also means they're able to practice to handle 45-minute lessons. Maybe they can go up to an hour. Those on a pre-professional track might be doing an hour to an hour and a half, 2 hours even, when they're 15, 16 years old. Just when they get even older, if they want to enter conservatory, 2 hours, 3 hours, it just depends. And there's no right or wrong answer to this. So as you can see, I didn't answer the question 100% because every situation is unique. What's more important is, how am I practicing? Am I being deliberate in my practicing? Am I repeating exercises and pieces or parts of pieces so that I develop good practice habits as opposed to bad ones? And if you follow those rules, you're guaranteed success. Thank you everyone for listening. Daniel Broniatowski from the Maestro Musicians Academy. We are a music school in Greater Boston, serving Lexington, Bedford, Walpole, and online via the World Wide Web. Find out more about us at maestromusicianslexington.com. As you can see, that's the spelling, Maestro Musicians Lexington, LEXINGTON.com. And then we're also maestromusiciansbedford.com and walpoleschoolofmusic.com. All of the links are below. And if you enjoy this video, please like us, share us,